The great Richard Roeper joins us now at Richard E. Roeper on Twitter, nationally syndicated film and TV critic for the Chicago Sun-Times, ABC TV in Chicago, and the Screen Time podcast. He's one of the best, and it's great to catch up with him. Appreciate the time, sir. You were one of the last people to interview James Caan. Can you tell us how that came about and share a couple great stories with the legend, please?
Yeah, first of all, it's just great to talk to you guys again. It's been too long, so you guys have been doing great. I've been keeping up with you. James Caan joined Twitter about a year and a half ago. And, when someone huge joins Twitter, they immediately get a couple 100,000 followers. Sometimes, oh, my God. And it was really him. It wasn't just a publicist. It was him, And then I was one of a few dozen people he was following. So we started DMing. And I reached out to him. And he had been through a lot of health problems, guys. It really wasn't working much anymore. And I just reached out to him and said, is there any way I could talk to you? Can I interview you? I want to talk to you about Thief and some of these other great movies you've done. And he was gracious enough to do it. And we got on the Zoom, which going on Zoom with James Caan is exactly what you'd think it would be like. He had the big giant headphones from like the 80s on. And he was fiddling around with it. But then once you start talking to him, he sounded exactly like James Caan. Charming, F-bombs flying. But I'll tell you something, he had this perfect recall from filming movies 30, 40, 50 years ago with stories from on the set of Brian's Song, one of the great football movies of all time. He played Brian Piccolo. Billy D. Williams played Gale Sayers. Thief, which we mentioned, 1981. It's been about 40 years since that came out. And, of course, The Godfather.
And I would also submit the original Gambler. I watched that during the pandemic. I thought it was fantastic.
That's a great point. And I've been telling people, I've been saying this, ever since we lost Mr. Caan last week. The Godfather is the greatest movie of all time, guys. When people say there's a debate, it's like, okay, you want to debate that, you want to debate Michael Jordan. It can look for a debate, but we know who the GOATs are in certain things, right? But if he had never been in The Godfather, he was in Brian's Song, one of the best football movies of all time. He was in The Gambler, one of the best gambling movies of all time. Thief, one of the best heist movies of all time. And don't forget, he was in Misery, one of the great psychological thrillers. So in 5 different genres, you could make an argument that he was in a top 10 movie.
Okay, that's a terrific point. And then where would you personally power rate his role as Sonny in Godfather compared to some of the other, outstanding performances we had in that movie?
Well, the thing that people forget, and this is how, he was so memorable. When you look at the 2 Godfather films, 1 and 2, let's just look at those 2. It's a total of about 6 hours of film, guys. We lose James Caan's Sonny Corleone about an hour and a half into the 6 hours of that saga. He gets one of the most famous assassination killings in the history of cinema, in The Causeway, right? They get him in that amazing scene, which was all, of course, squibs and practical effects, no special effects. But his presence looms throughout the films. I always say it's a great character. And then, of course, there's a great moment where he appears in Godfather, too. But it's almost reminiscent of Silence of the Lambs, where Anthony Hopkins was on screen for maybe 25 minutes, but he won Best Lead Actor. Because even when he's not on screen, we're thinking about him. People are talking about him. So, even though he had the smallest of the son roles, John Cazale and Al Pacino had larger roles as Don Corleone's 3 grown sons. Sonny Corleone's right there. It's just amazing. Of course, he was nominated for supporting actor. They all were, so he didn't win. But, it's still one of the great screen portrayals of all time.
I would agree with that, absolutely. Straighten me out on this. I thought I read that when he got divorced, one of his divorces to unwind and get back and not be depressed, he moved into the Playboy Mansion.
Yeah, there's a lot of footage from the 70s. The story, now the legend, guys, is that somewhere around 73 or 74, let's just say he became friends with all 12 Playmates of the Year, January through December. Let's just say he struck up friendships. He had a 12-game hitting streak, if you would.
They were good buddies. They would watch football on Sundays together. Okay.
Oh, my
Probably
God.
discussing, football and movies and, the rodeo, all the things he was into. That's legend. I can't confirm or deny.
Yeah. Okay. Richard Roeper, our guest. The podcast is called Screen Time, longtime nationally syndicated film critic for the Chicago Sun-Times. Unfortunately, other sad news this weekend. Tony Sirico passed away, and his character, Paulie Walnuts in The Sopranos, is one of the best all-time TV characters in the history of show business. So when did you realize, when you first watched The Sopranos, that show was going to be special? And then when did you think to yourself, my God, this guy playing Paulie Walnuts is absolutely incredible?
Yeah, right off the bat. I mean, you go back and look at Sopranos from the pilot episode. I mean, it's brilliant television. And kind of, along with The Wire and a few other shows, that late 90s, early 2000s was the first glory period for premium cable, where we felt like we really needed to have HBO, right? And Tony Sirico was an interesting guy because he had done time. He was not really considered an actor, and he was like 50 years old before and he had a small part in Goodfellas, which I think led to The Sopranos. And he did a movie called Wonder Wheel, where he played a mobster with Jim Belushi. It's a Woody Allen film, so it kind of got lost in the shuffle about 6 years ago, but he's very good in that. But he was amazing. And what I loved about him, guys, first of all, he had that look, those wingtip sideburns. You've never seen anything like it. And of course, he was a killer, but he could be really funny. That character gave you comic relief sometimes on The Sopranos, because he would get involved in the wackiest, or he'd say the craziest things, or, he'd be outside the little hangout, getting the sun, holding the little shield up to get his tan on. So he was a little bit of a comic relief character. I'll tell you a quick anecdote, too, about 15, 20 years ago, because The Sopranos was still on. Jersey Boys had started on Broadway, the great story about Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, right? The famed Broadway play. And he was in the lobby. Tony Sirico was in the lobby, looking exactly like Paulie Walnuts. And he was just standing there, shaking hands with people. And I said, "Oh, that's really cool. Does he have some connection to the play?" And someone told me, "No, he just likes to show up and greet people because he just likes to get recognized and say hello. He just showed up on his own, hang out and just say hi to people." And everybody, of course, if you're a fan of Jersey Boys, you know him from The Sopranos. So he was just sort of like an unofficial greeter.
That's awesome. Wow. Official greet. I like stories like that too. I mean, the guy went to prison. I mean, in the Gambino family, allegedly, but it was how about it's like just watching, I could do that. I could act. And then he comes out, he gets one of the biggest shows in history. I love that story.
And the story was, whenever a new writer would come on the show, he'd take him aside and say, listen, I hope you get some good story arcs for my character. Also, if you kill me off, you and I are going to have a conversation.
Oh, yeah, right. Absolutely. You don't want to do that.
Well, I mean, just going down memory lane yesterday, Richard, some of the scenes that he was in The Sopranos, I mean, the part where he pulls the landscaper out of the tree, whacks the guy in the head with a shovel, steals her lawnmower, the scene with the psychic where he is just, it's hilarious. You're right. The comic relief was so awesome. The intervention with Chrissy, and then the Pine Barrens episode is, it's legendary.
Yeah, probably one of the top 10 TV episodes of all time. And that was the thing about Paulie. I mean, Paulie Walnuts, even the name. But, Tony Soprano at least wanted to give off this kind of veneer of being a suburban, businessman and husband and father, and not do the killing himself. Occasionally he had to. Paulie was a blunt instrument. He didn't care what people thought about him. He was like, however we got to get this done, this is who I am. I'm a wise guy.
Do you recall, because that's a good point about Tony, he didn't really want to do any of the killing. I think the fifth or sixth episode of Sopranos, college, when he's taking Meadow to look at some, and then they actually show on screen, Tony chokes out the bad guy, right? The rat. Was that one of the first times ever where a TV show actually had the lead character kill somebody on screen? And that's why people were like, oh my God, the lead guy just killed somebody. We've never seen that before.
Yeah, that's a great point, because they're always removed, removed from the actual killing. When you go back and look at The Godfather, when we see the original Godfather, Don Corleone is, he's this respected businessman and leader in the community and all of this sort of thing. But then in Godfather 2, we get the flashbacks and we see that when he first came to America, he did what he had to do. He was the guy with the gun who took out the guy, during the parade. He did the killing himself. He could do that kind of stuff. So again, it's sort of like a reminder, because we almost come to love and admire these characters. And it's almost as if the show or the movie's creators are saying, yes, they're great characters, but let's not forget they're killers.
Yeah, yeah. It's so rewatchable, too. And I would say at this point, because we've had so many good TV shows since The Sopranos ended, Richard, that I think the show is now underrated, as impossible as that might seem.
Well, you think somebody, who's 30 years old was 9 when it came out. So they'd have to discover it like we would be discovering something from the 50s or 60s. It's old-time TV for them. They're not rewatching it. They're watching it for the first time.
Okay, so you're going to hang out for one more segment. It's Follow the Money here on VSiN, the sports betting network. We're talking to Richard Roeper, nationally syndicated film critic. He's been doing it for a long time. Chicago Sun-Times. Also, his podcast is called Screen Time. Tonight, Paulie, we're all excited, right?
Yes.
Because we have the return of Better Call Saul. Only 6 episodes left. And Richard has not watched the final 6 episodes yet. But he has a bunch of theories on what's going to happen. And you can bet on some of this stuff in faraway places. We ran down some of the props earlier. Like, is Kim going to die? If so, who is going to kill her? Will she escape? Will she use the vacuum guy to get out? Who's going to kill Lalo, if anybody does? There are a ton of props for this show, and it's going to be over with by the time the football season starts. So we're going to run down all of these props, and Richard will do his best to see what he can find, picking his way through these to see if anything sticks out as we continue here on a Monday morning on Follow the Money. It is VSiN, the sports betting network.
Bet with Bet Rivers. More with Richard Roeper at Richard E. Roeper on Twitter. And sticking with that baseball theme, it's a 30-year anniversary of A League of Their Own, and you wrote a piece about it. What did you think of Hank's performance and this movie, looking back on it?
You know, it's interesting. Tom Hanks, because everybody knows the famous line, there's no crying in baseball.
Yep.
It's always listed as one of the top 100 lines of all time. When you rewatch the movie, guys, you know, he's not in the film until about 35 minutes in, you know, because we get the whole backstory of Gina Davis and Lori Petty. And John Lovitz, by the way, as the scout, has about 8 hilarious lines, and then he disappears. But so Hanks is great, but what I like about he's really a supporting character in this film. And when I rewatched the movie, one of the things I was struck by was how much baseball was in the movie, actual baseball game, you know. And, you know, everybody from Gina Davis to Madonna, Rosie O'Donnell, they all went through extensive training, and you could tell. I mean, yeah, of course, there's going to be a few scenes where there's some stunt doubles, but, you know, the way they hold the bat, the way they whip the ball around the infield, they played really good baseball in that movie.
30 years old, huh?
That's surprising.
That puts it in perspective for us.
Yes.
It's been so long that they're now going to do, Amazon Prime is doing a limited series coming out in August called League of Their Own, which is about the same baseball league, but with different characters.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Good.
Of course, yeah, and I've got a chance to look at it. It's actually pretty good.
How frustrating has this been for you as a White Sox fan? And you think they're going to snap out of it and make the playoffs?
You know, they might limp into the playoffs, guys. But, like, you know, I'm watching Yankees Red Sox last night. I'm a big, other than the White Sox, my favorite team has always been to watch is the Dodgers. And I'm like, even if the Sox got into the playoffs, first of all, they never even make it to the World Series to be swept by the Dodgers. But it's like they're not in the same league as the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Blue Jays, the Astros, the Mets. They're just not. You know, they don't have that type of – there's a lot of talent on that team. And for, 2 years at least, guys, they've been kind of the sexy pick in Vegas at the beginning of the year, like 20-1, 18-1, because of the mesh of young talent and veterans like Lance Lynn and Liam Hendricks and Jose Abreu. But there's something about this team that just doesn't gel in the clubhouse or on the field. They're just frustrating to watch.
Yep, well said. And I just don't think they're going to get healthy, and it's not going to happen this year for the White Sox. Tonight, the Better Call Saul comes back. There's only 6 episodes left. How do you, when looking at this show, and they take their time, and it's so smart and creative, do you think it's on the level of Breaking Bad?
It has, which is one of the great upsets of all time. I mean, I figured it would be pretty good, but the fact that it's become that good. And you talk about rewatching, guys. I went back. I've been watching some of the old Breaking Bad episodes just to remember how Saul came into it. This is amazing. It was season 2, the first time we see Saul Goodman, when Bryan Cranston comes in to see him looking for a lawyer.
Okay.
He actually tells Walter White, well, you know, my real name is Jimmy McGill. He says it in the second season of Breaking Bad. They're already laying the groundwork in some way for a prequel.
That's incredible.
I did not realize that part.
Good observation.
Also,
good catch.
Well, and how about this? And I mentioned this earlier, Richard. How about the part where Walt and Jesse, they have like the ski masks on. They take Saul out to the middle of the desert, and he's like, "Who sent you, Lalo?" You know, you think nothing of it when you're watching Breaking Bad live, but now it's like, oh my God, they thought of everything.
Yeah, in the premiere episode of Breaking Bad, Walter White's working in the car wash, and he's got this dolly with a barrel of cleaning solution. In the second to last episode of Breaking Bad, he's got a dolly with a barrel filled with cash. It's almost like they have all these little things planted throughout the series, leading to either the prequel or later in the series. Incredible.
Yes. Let me throw a couple props at you. What will happen to Kim Wexler? Escapes minus 160, dies plus 120.
I think in a show like this that has consequences, she doesn't escape. I don't think she escapes.
So your theory is she ends up getting it. We had a good tweet earlier suggesting that the person who sent us a tweet, Richard, said, I think Kim escapes and lives because Saul would have been totally wrecked in Breaking Bad. What do you think about that?
Well, that's the thing, though. When you watch Breaking Bad, he's a shadow, in a way, in a shell of Jimmy McGill and Saul Goodman from Better Call Saul. He's a worse person. He's more cunning. He's more ruthless. He has less of a heart. So that leads me to believe that he has completely given up on humanity by the time we get to Breaking Bad, and it's just going to be like a sleazy lawyer.
Oh, man. So I got to tell you, Rhea Seehorn, she killed this character. Yeah. I mean, she did an amazing job as the show developed.
Great actress, and, she had done stuff before, but I think one of the reasons it worked so well is she was not a hugely known actor, so we immediately buy her. And, yes, just this kind of great way of playing somebody who has a conscience at the beginning and has ambitions to do the right thing. But, she's a willing participant. She doesn't get co-opted by Saul, Jimmy, in this story. She's the one who makes certain decisions that are almost more ruthless than his.
Follow the Money, Paulie and Mitch Vies in the Sports Betting Network. Richard Roeper, our guest at Richard E. Roeper on Twitter, Chicago Sun-Times, nationally syndicated film and TV critic, Screen Times, the podcast. If she passes, who kills her? Who would you? Mike is 12-1. Lalo's the favorite, minus 115.
I think when you're, if you're going to wager on stuff like this, there's no point in going with the obvious, guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would go with, the long shot, because this is a show that has continually surprised us, even though we know where certain things are going to lead because it's a prequel.
Do you think Lalo makes it, or does Gus kill Lalo, or does Lalo survive this?
I think Lalo survives it.
So do I. So do I.
I would agree with that.
And
too.
I also, and if you know something here, don't tell me. But I think if they make a spinoff of the show, you got to make it of Lalo, because this guy again was just awesome when they brought him into the show, and he's developed so nicely during the stretch.
I wouldn't be surprised if that happens.
Okay.
Hey guys, we just showed a picture of you two. How about the career that Odenkirk has had? I mean, this guy has been fantastic in this role, but he's had a great career in a long career. How it's worked out.
Yeah, and I've known him for a long time. He's originally from Oak Park, Chicago.
Oh, okay.
Kind of came up doing comedy. People might not, I think some people know some of his comedic work. He was actually a writer on Saturday Night Live. So for him to make this pivot into this incredible character, and he's such a great guy, and he had that health scare
right.
on the set of Better Call Saul in Albuquerque last year, and he's doing well, and it's great to see that. Again, I talked to him about a year and a half ago, and he's so smart, and again, he's a guy who was a working actor, but is so appreciative for this role of a lifetime.
That's very cool.
Well
I did watch, I don't know how it holds up, but I did watch Mr. Show with Odenkirk and David Cross many years ago, and I thought it was great.
You want to see a really funny thing he does, too, very early on Curb Your Enthusiasm. He plays a porn star.
That's right.
Invites Larry over for dinner. And he's so funny because, again, he doesn't look anything like a guy who would be a porn star.
I forgot about that. That is well done.
And his wife is all, take off your shoes before you come to the house. And he's like, you're a porn star.
That's exactly right. That was a Porno Gil. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you would recommend for us and the viewers out there? I know Severance is getting a lot of run. The Offer. What do you recommend that's out right now? Yeah,
there's a series that just debuted on Apple TV Plus called Blackbird. Taron Egerton is based on a true story. He plays a guy who is in prison, and they tell him to let him out if he can get a serial killer to confess. And the late Ray Liotta plays his father in one of his last roles. And he's great in it. And he's playing a guy who's dying, so it makes it even more poignant to watch it. But that's called Blackbird. That's on Apple TV Plus. And if people are up for going to the movies, there's a horror film called Black Phone that came out about 2 weeks ago. that's set in the late 70s and is it kind of reminds me a little bit of Saw, but classier in its execution. Ethan Hawke playing a serial killer, and he usually plays such a likable guy. So it's great when you see an actor play against type.
If you had to get rid of one streaming service, what would it be?
Oh, man. There's some out there I barely heard of. I would just say I would like to see the Peacock people do a better job with the programming and just their execution and stuff. I don't want to get rid of anybody because I don't want anybody to lose their jobs, but I think they got to step up their game.
Okay.
I think they got to step up their game.
Tell people about your podcast.
The podcast is called Screen Time, anything that you can see on screen. And what I've been doing this summer, guys, really a lot of fun, is revisiting a lot of classic movies and TV shows from the 80s and the 90s. We got one up right now, 1982. Guys, summer of 82 was an incredible year for movies. E.T., Poltergeist, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Blade Runner. They all came out in the summer, just the summer of 1982. So it's really fun to go back and look at those films.
Great to catch up with you again. We'll do it soon. And pulling for your Whites if the White Sox can get in there. Thanks for coming on.
All right, be well, guys. Great talking to
you.
You
as well.
Awesome spot, Richard.
Man, he's right. Don't go with the obvious there.
Mike, 12-1.
Yeah.
Lalo, going to have a follow-up show with him. Win, lose, recapping the weekend on deck here on Follow the Money.
Visit VSiN.com to get current odds, listen for free, find showtimes, and download VSiN sports betting podcasts.